I think that we need to put sentiment aside. This country had an election in over 176,000 polling units in Nigeria in February of this year. Over 176,000 polling units. And the feedback in over 90% of those polling units has been very successful. The event went on peacefully. We had sitting governors who lost election on that day to go to Senate or to return. We had to go to Senate or to House of Rep for some. We had the Labour Party candidates in FCT win the election. Labour Party candidate in Etiosa local government on the same day, in the same election, was declared a winner. Same across the country. And you tell me that the election that produced all of those other candidates, where APC, even in Lagos, lost the election for the presidential from Lagos on that same day. And yet, some people recognize that their governors or members of the National Assembly had a free and fair election, but the election that held concurrently, same voting system, everybody went to the polling unit. They gave you two forms. You filled one for National Assembly, one for presidential, and you come on social media to condemn the presidential that held concurrently with the House of Assembly that produced two major Labour Party officials in the FCT. Ireti Kingigbe for Senate and the other gentleman for the House of Rep. Please cut us some slack. This was one of the freest and fairest elections. It had never happened in the history of Nigeria that much number of people, influential politicians, sitting governors, Niger State governor, I think he was successful, went on to the Senate. But then you had his colleague, for example, in Bagudu, in Kebbi, was going to go to the Senate, His Excellency General Minister. And you had many others. You had in Cross River State, you had the sitting governor, His Excellency Senator Ben Ayade, could not return back to the Senate. On the same day, same polling unit, same voting, same election. That election, to me, arguably, and to over 8 million Nigerians that voted for Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, was the freest and fairest election in the history of Nigeria. And it reflected the power of unity. While Asiwaju...
With all of the allegations of suppression of votes, allegations of voter intimidation,
so give
the
me
violence that are being reported.
Tell me how many polling units were this violence reported? The same violence reported in elections that produced senators and House of Rep members. If you had 176,000, like their Lord Justices said, what proportion, what percentage was that a substantial number? And the Electoral Act already provided that if you had polling units that had issues and challenges, the voting at those polling units should be nullified, which I'm sure INEC did. If you were there when they were reading all their submission, they would say, okay, how many polling units? Was there any votes that were cancelled? They would say, yes, we had polling units that were cancelled. Why were they cancelled? Because of violence. There was already a provision for that. And that was not a substantial number to defeat and to discredit an election that held in 176,000 polling units in Nigeria.
But does it mean that there were no violence? Does it mean there were no suppression of vote? Does it mean there were no people were not injured? People blood were not not shed?
So let me explain this to you, Sheon. We're talking about the principle of substantiality. Because there were pockets of issues in one place or the other, which were automatically, by law, cancelled votes by INEC, does not discredit voting in 176,000 polling units across the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Also, one thing that is important is to understand that there is no democracy in the world that is 100%. there is no election that has 100% perfection. It is a process. You have an iPhone. I assume it was iPhone 13 or 14 Pro Max. But you're aware that today, iPhone 15 is about to be launched. Before 2027 election, there would have been iPhone 20. But that's not even the main point. Just recently, the same iPhone that you got the other day, I've requested you to update your iOS to iOS 16, I think 0.6.0. The same phone that you bought that was at the latest had to be improved upon. Now, Twitter is saying that very soon you are going to be able to make telephone calls and video calls from its platform. Because life, it's a process and men are in sizes. In other words, in 2011, we had an election. In 2015, we had an election. In 2019, we had an election. But none of them had the level of sophistication or introduction of technology as we have done in 2015.
Part of the technology in which INEC promised and failed on the promise.
So, like I said to you, there's what they call iteration in project management. This was the first, is that the mindset and the intention to create a better system. The system is being improved upon. They did a piloting of this system in the Ekiti election and the Osun election. We brought it into this election. There were technical glitches that INEC talked about, but I can tell you that the Imo election, what is it called election, Imo, Bayelsa and Kogi election, is going to be better because there is continuous improvement on our electoral system. Our electoral act over the couple of years have continued to introduce new processes into the election. As good as this election was, it is our hope that the next set of elections are going to be better and the next general election will be way better. So yes, there are pockets of challenges here and there. We respect the fact that there were areas that could have, been more better. There were issues in pockets of location, but to come here and discredit a whole general election where over 15 million people voted just because you don't like the man or because your party did not win, that is at most devilish, that is unpatriotic, and that is totally not what it means to leave the office of a citizen.
Let me